Some mornings arrive wrapped in hope so bright it hurts to look at directly. This was one of those mornings. Lucy Bourke opened her eyes before dawn and felt her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape her chest and float up to the ceiling. 12 years. 12 years of marriage, of secrets, of loving a man who thought he knew her but only knew the version she had carefully crafted for him. Today was the day she would finally strip away the costume and show him the truth. She slipped out of bed and walked to the window, watching the city wake up beneath a sky painted in shades of pink and gold. Somewhere down there, in the steel and glass towers that scraped the heavens, were buildings she owned, floors of offices where hundreds of people arrived each morning because she had invested in their dreams, believed in their potential, given them the resources to build something extraordinary. Her mother had once told her that real power was not in being seen, but in seeing others. And Lucy had spent the last decade proving that philosophy could build an empire. But Angus knew none of this. Her husband slept peacefully in their bed, his breathing steady and deep, completely unaware that the woman who darned his socks and clipped coupons from the Sunday paper could buy and sell entire companies before breakfast. She had kept this secret because her mother, in her final days, had gripped Lucy's hand with surprising strength and made her promise something that had shaped the entire trajectory of her marriage. Let him love you for your heart, not your money. Too many men have loved the Bourke fortune and never bothered to meet the woman carrying it. Promise me you will know the difference, Lucy had promised. And she had kept that promise through poverty theatre that would have won awards. She learned to shop at thrift stores and make it look natural. She learned to stretch meals, to suggest cheap date nights as if they were her preference rather than his budget constraints. She learned to watch him cry over failed ventures and loan rejections without ever whispering that she could solve everything with a single phone call. The hardest part was not the pretending. The hardest part was watching him suffer and choosing his pride over his peace. When his consulting firm nearly collapsed, when investors pulled out and clients disappeared, when he sat at their tiny kitchen table with his head in his hands, whispering that he was a failure, that he was letting her down, that maybe he was not cut out for this, she had held him. She whispered the same promises every time. We will get through this. I believe in you. We will be okay. And they were always okay, though not for the reasons he thought. She made phone calls he never heard. She arranged introductions he thought were luck. She smoothed paths and opened doors and built a bridge beneath his feet while he believed he was walking on water through sheer determination. She loved him. God, she loved him with an intensity that frightened her sometimes. She loved the way he laughed at terrible jokes, the way he hummed while making coffee, the way he reached for her hand without thinking when they walked down the street. She loved him enough to become small so he could feel big. But today, finally, the smallness would end. Today was their anniversary, and Lucy had decided that 12 years of silence was enough. She would tell him everything. She would explain about the investments, the properties, the fortune that had grown exponentially while she played the role of supportive wife in discount store dresses. She would show him the documents she had prepared, a proposal for a partnership, a plan to build something together as equals, a future where she stood beside him at full height instead of crouching in his shadow. She had even bought the cake. The thought made her smile as she drove across town to Miller's Bakery, the same rundown shop where they had bought their first anniversary cake when money was so tight they shared a single slice with 2 forks. The place smelled exactly the same, butter and vanilla and yeast rising in industrial ovens. The baker, Mrs. Miller, still wore the same flour-dusted apron and still recognized Lucy, despite the fact that Lucy could now buy the entire bakery without checking her account balance. Anniversary cake? Mrs. Miller asked with a knowing smile. The same one as always, Lucy confirmed. The cake was small, modest, covered in simple white frosting with Happy Anniversary written in shaky blue letters. It was perfect. It represented everything they had been and everything they were about to become. Lucy carried it to her car with hands that trembled slightly. She had rehearsed what she would say 1,000 times in her head. She would walk into his office, set the cake down, take his hands in hers, and tell him that she had something important to share. She would ask him to sit down to really listen, and then she would lay out the truth, like cards on a table. She imagined his shock, his confusion, maybe his anger at being deceived. But she also imagined the moment after that when understanding would dawn, when he would realize that every struggle, every obstacle, every victory had been theirs together, even if he had not known all the players on the field. She imagined him laughing in disbelief. She imagined him pulling her close and whispering that he could not believe he was married to someone so extraordinary. She imagined his pride in her, his amazement, his joy at discovering that his wife was not just his equal, but someone who had been silently powerful all along. She imagined them leaving the office together, going somewhere private, and finally talking about the future as true partners, instead of playing roles in a play where only one person had read the whole script. The drive to Lovell Automotive Consulting took forever, and no time at all. Lucy parked in the visitor section, grabbed the cake box, and walked through the glass doors, with her heart singing a song that felt like freedom. The lobby was quiet, cleaner than usual, and the receptionist waved at her with a familiar smile. Lucy headed straight for the elevator, riding it up to the floor where Angus kept his office. She watched the numbers climb and felt butterflies in her stomach like she was 16 again. She should have called first. She should have made an appointment, but this was a surprise, and surprises were supposed to be spontaneous and romantic and perfect. The security guard outside Angus's office tried to intercept her as she approached. He was new, someone Lucy did not recognize, and he stepped into her path with apologetic firmness. "Ma'am, I am sorry, but Mr. Lovell is in a private meeting and asked not to be disturbed." Lucy smiled at him. That same patient smile she had perfected over years of being underestimated. "It is okay. I am his wife. He will not mind." The guard hesitated, clearly torn between his instructions and the social awkwardness of stopping a man's wife from seeing him on their anniversary. His hand hovered near his radio, uncertainty written across his young face. Lucy did not wait for him to decide. She shifted the cake box to one hand, turned the door handle with confident ease, and pushed. The door swung open, the world tilted. Reality bent sideways and inside out and backwards all at once. Her husband sat in his leather chair, the expensive one she had bought him for his birthday, while claiming she found it at a yard sale. A woman straddled his lap, her skirt hiked up around her thighs, her hands tangled in his hair like she owned him. Angus's hands gripped the woman's waist, fingers pressing into fabric like he was holding onto something precious, something necessary. His eyes were closed. His face held an expression Lucy had not seen directed at her in months, maybe years. Tenderness, desire, presence. He was actually present with this woman in a way he had not been present with Lucy since sometime around their 8th anniversary, when his struggles had consumed him and she had disappeared into the wallpaper of his life. The woman was laughing at something he had whispered, her head thrown back in genuine delight. Her name was Charlie Knott, though Lucy did not know that yet. All Lucy knew was that this stranger was touching her husband like she owned him, and he was letting her, encouraging her, holding her like she was the answer to prayers he had never bothered to pray with Lucy. The cake slipped from Lucy's hands. It hit the marble floor with a sound like thunder, the box splitting open, white frosting exploding across expensive tiles in a pattern that looked like a star or a wound or the map of a broken future. The sound echoed in the sudden silence, loud enough to wake the dead or kill the living. Neither of them had heard the door open, but they heard the cake fall. Angus's eyes snapped open. Charlie scrambled sideways, nearly falling off his lap in her haste to disentangle herself. Lucy stood in the doorway, perfectly still, not breathing, not thinking, just existing in a moment that would define the rest of her life. She should have screamed. She should have thrown something. She should have demanded answers or explanations or apologies. But Lucy had not survived in the world of high-stakes investments by reacting impulsively. So instead, she walked forward with a strange calm that came from someplace deep and cold and ancient. Her heels clicked against marble. Each step echoed. The security guard appeared in the doorway behind her, taking in the scene and immediately backing out, understanding that he had just failed at his one job. Angus was trying to stand, trying to push Charlie away completely, trying to say something that started with, "Lucy, wait, this is not..." But Lucy was not waiting. Lucy was done waiting. She had spent 12 years waiting for him to notice her, to see her, to wonder about her. She reached his desk and removed her wedding ring. The ring she had bought herself because he could not afford one when they got married. The ring she wore like a shield against every doubt that had whispered in her ear over the years. She placed it carefully on the mahogany surface, right next to his coffee cup that still steamed with fresh brew, and finally looked into his eyes. What she saw there was not love. It was panic and guilt and shame and the dawning realization that he had been caught doing something unforgivable. But there was no love. Maybe there had not been love for a long time, and she had been too busy playing her role to notice its absence. "Lucy, please, let me explain. This is not what it looks like." The words were so predictable they were almost funny. Lucy raised her hand and her palm connected with his face. The slap was not violent. It was not revenge. It was grief made manifest, the physical expression of a heart breaking so completely that the pieces would never fit back together the same way. The sound cracked through the office like a period at the end of a sentence that should have continued, but instead just stopped. Charlie gasped, pressing herself into the corner, like she could disappear into the wall. Angus stood frozen, his hand rising to his reddening cheek, his mouth opening and closing without sound, like a fish drowning in air. Lucy turned away from him and walked toward the door with the same measured steps she had used to enter. Each footfall felt like she was walking through water, through mud, through the heaviest substance in the universe. But she kept moving, because stopping would mean collapsing, and she refused to give him the satisfaction of watching her fall apart. She refused to give him her tears when he had already taken 12 years of her life. "Lucy! Lucy, stop! Let me explain. It is not what you think. She means nothing!" She paused at the doorway and looked back one final time. Angus stood behind his desk, his shirt disheveled, his hair messed from another woman's fingers, his face a portrait of desperation and fear. Charlie had retreated to the corner of the office, suddenly understanding that she was part of something much bigger and uglier than a simple affair. Lucy spoke for the first time since entering the room, and her voice was so calm it sounded like someone else was speaking through her body. "You have no idea what I think. You never did." Then she walked out, leaving behind the ring, the cake, and the man who had just destroyed the only person who ever truly loved him when he was nothing. The elevator doors closed on his voice, still calling her name, still begging for a chance to explain, still not understanding that explanations were pointless when the truth was painted across his guilt-stricken face. Lucy rode down in silence, walked through the lobby in silence, climbed into her car in silence. She sat behind the wheel with her hands resting on the leather, staring at the empty space where her wedding ring used to be, and felt absolutely nothing. The tears would come later. The rage would come later. The grief would come later. Right now, there was only the strange, hollow freedom of a woman who had just watched her entire life explode and realized she was still breathing. She started the car and drove away from Lovell Automotive, consulting for the last time. Angus would try to call. He would try to follow. He would try everything he could think of to fix what he had broken, but he would never find her, because the woman he married, the woman he thought he knew, the woman who made herself small so he could feel big, that woman no longer existed. In her place was Lucy Bourke, billionaire, investor, empire builder, and she was about to teach him exactly what it felt like to lose everything. Chapter 2. The Woman Who Disappeared. Angus stood in his office staring at the ring on his desk like it was a live grenade that might explode at any moment. Charlie had fled within seconds of Lucy's departure, muttering something about needing to get back to work, suddenly remembering an appointment, anything to escape the suffocating weight of what had just happened. The frosting from the destroyed cake was already hardening on the floor, turning from soft white to crusty yellow at the edges, and Angus could not bring himself to call someone to clean it up, because that would mean acknowledging it had happened. He tried Lucy's phone. It rang once and went to voicemail. He tried again. This time it did not even ring, just went straight to voicemail. Her voice on the recording sounded cheerful and warm, the voice of a woman who still believed in happy endings. "Hi, you have reached Lucy. Leave a message and I will call you back." He could not speak. What would he even say? "Sorry I was caught with another woman on our anniversary. Sorry I threw away 12 years for someone whose last name I barely remember. Sorry I destroyed the best thing in my life because I was bored and stupid and selfish." He hung up and immediately called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. He called 17 times in a row, each attempt more desperate than the last. Until finally on the 18th try he got a recorded message that the number was no longer in service. She had disconnected. Her phone in less than 2 hours. Panic clawed up his throat like a living thing trying to escape. Angus grabbed his jacket and ran to the parking garage, breaking every speed limit on the way home, his hands shaking so badly on the wheel that he nearly sideswiped 2 cars. He rehearsed explanations in his head, but they all sounded hollow. It was a mistake. "I was weak. She does not mean anything. You are the one I love." Every excuse he could think of was pathetic and transparent and insufficient. When he burst through the apartment door, he found everything exactly as it had been when he left that morning. Lucy's coffee cup still sat in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim. Her slippers were by the bed, worn down at the heels from years of use. Her toothbrush in the bathroom. The book she was reading on the nightstand, bookmark halfway through. But when he opened the closet, he saw that an entire section was empty. Not all her clothes, just specific items. The nice ones, the ones she wore to her mysterious volunteer work that she never talked about in detail. Her good shoes were gone, the heels that made her legs look long and elegant. The small suitcase was gone, and when he checked the bathroom cabinet, her medications, her skincare products, her essentials, all vanished like they had never existed. She had been prepared for this. The realization hit him like a fist to the stomach, knocking the air from his lungs. This was not a spontaneous flight born of heartbreak and impulse. Lucy had taken only what she needed to disappear, leaving behind the costume of the struggling wife, taking with her the tools of whoever she really was. She had planned for this possibility, maybe not this exact scenario, but some version of it. She had prepared an exit strategy. How long had she been ready to leave? He slumped onto their bed and noticed an envelope on his pillow, placed with precise care. His hands fumbled as he opened it, tearing the paper in his haste. Inside was a single piece of paper, with an address for a law firm he had never heard of, and a handwritten note in Lucy's careful, perfect script. "All divorce papers will be handled through Whitmore and Associates. Do not try to find me. Do not contact me directly. Any attempt to do so will be considered harassment and dealt with accordingly. The apartment lease is in your name only. It always was. You have until the end of the month to secure your own housing. The joint account has been closed and the funds returned to their original source. What you thought we shared was never ours. It was mine, and I am taking it back. You wanted to know what I think? I think you just lost the only person who ever loved you enough to pretend to be less than she was. I think you will spend the rest of your life wondering who I really was. And I think that is a punishment far more fitting than anything I could say to your face." There was no signature, no closure, no softness, just the cold, clinical dismantling of a life he thought he understood. Angus read the note 23 times, searching for softness, for forgiveness, for any hint that this was not final. But the words remained hard and sharp and absolute. Each reading felt like swallowing glass. He called the law firm. A receptionist, with a voice like ice water, told him that yes, they were handling Mrs. Bourke's divorce proceedings, and that papers would be served to him within the week. When he asked to speak to Lucy, the woman actually laughed. Not cruelly, but with genuine amusement, as if he had asked to speak to the Queen of England or the President or God himself. "Mr. Lovell, Mrs. Bourke is not someone you just speak to. Her time is extremely valuable. All communication will go through her legal team. Her time is extremely valuable." The phrase rattled around in his head like a marble in an empty jar, bouncing off the walls of his skull. That evening, Angus sat alone in the apartment and began searching for his wife online, suddenly realizing he had never done this before. Why would he? She was just Lucy, his wife, the woman who made dinner and asked about his day and never seemed to have much of a life beyond him. She was background scenery in his life, supportive and present and utterly unremarkable. What he found made his vision blur and his stomach turn. Lucy Bourke was not just wealthy. She was not just successful. She was a legend in circles he had never known existed. Article after article profiled her investment strategies, her philanthropic work, her ability to identify potential in people and companies that others overlooked. There were photos of her at galas, wearing gowns that cost more than his car, shaking hands with people whose names he recognized from newspaper headlines, smiling with the quiet confidence of someone who owned rooms before she even entered them. One article from 5 years ago made him stop breathing entirely. It featured Lucy receiving an award for transformative investment in emerging industries, and included a quote that punched him in the chest and kept punching. "My mother taught me that true wealth is not about what you have, but about what you give. I've spent my career investing in people who remind me that potential is everywhere if you are willing to look past the surface. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones everyone else overlooks." There was a photo of her at the ceremony, radiant in emerald green silk, and standing next to her was a woman Angus recognized. It was the wife of his biggest client, the one who had given him his first major contract 7 years ago, the deal that had launched his entire company. He had always thought that contract came from his brilliant pitch and his natural charm, from his ability to connect with people and sell his vision. He had been wrong. He pulled up his records and began tracing back every major client. Every significant deal, every moment his company had been saved from the brink of disaster. And behind each one, if he looked hard enough, was a connection to Lucy, a college friend of hers on the board of directors, a former classmate of her mother's in a decision-making position, a charity she supported that happened to recommend his services, an investor who knew her personally and took her suggestions seriously. His company was not built by him. It was built by her, stone by invisible stone, while he took credit for the architecture and congratulated himself on his talent. Angus spent the next 5 hours spiraling through this realization, clicking through photos and articles and interviews, seeing his wife living an entire existence he never knew about. In one video clip from a women's leadership conference, Lucy was on stage answering questions, and she was magnetic in a way he had never seen. Confident without arrogance, knowledgeable without condescension, powerful without cruelty. Someone in the audience asked how she balanced her personal life with her career, and Lucy paused for a long moment before saying, "Balance is a myth we tell ourselves. The truth is we make choices. We choose what to prioritize and what to hide. And sometimes we hide parts of ourselves because we love someone more than we love being seen. But eventually, hiding becomes suffocating. And you have to choose between breathing and being loved." I chose breathing. The audience had applauded, thinking it was inspirational wisdom. Angus heard it as a confession, as an indictment, as the truth of their marriage laid bare for strangers while he remained oblivious. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Just an image, no words, no context. It was a photo of Lucy standing next to a sleek black car that cost more than he made in 3 years. She was wearing a white pantsuit that made her look like she could buy and sell the world before lunch. Her hair was styled differently, pulled back in a way that showed the elegant line of her neck and the proud set of her shoulders. She was laughing at something someone off camera had said, her head thrown back, her whole face lit up with joy. She looked free. She looked powerful. She looked absolutely nothing like the woman who used to apologize for buying the expensive brand of pasta sauce. Angus stared at that photo until his screen went dark, and then he stared at his own reflection in the black mirror of his phone, and he did not recognize the man looking back at him. That man was a stranger, a fool, someone who had been handed a treasure and mistaken it for something ordinary. He tried to call the number that sent the photo. It was disconnected. Of course it was. Lucy was not leaving breadcrumbs for him to follow. She was showing him what he lost and then slamming the door in his face. That night, Angus did not sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about 12 years of marriage, trying to remember when Lucy had stopped smiling at him the way she used to, trying to remember when her laughter had become rare, trying to remember when she had faded from vibrant to invisible. But he could not pinpoint a moment because it had been gradual, a slow, disappearing act that he had not noticed because he was too busy looking at himself. He was a monster, not the kind that screamed and hit and obviously destroyed, but the kind that eroded slowly, taking and taking and taking until there was nothing left to take, and then expressing surprise when the well ran dry. Chapter 3. The House of Cards. 2 days after Lucy left, Angus received an eviction notice. Not from their apartment, but from his office. The building owner was terminating his lease with immediate effect due to restructuring requirements. The letter was formal and legal and offered him 2 weeks to clear out. When Angus called to negotiate, to explain that he had a contract, to beg for more time, the property manager told him that actually, upon review of the original lease terms, there had been an error and the building owner was well within their rights to terminate. Who owns this building? Angus demanded, already knowing the answer would hurt. That information is held by a private holding company. I'm not at liberty to disclose. The property manager's voice was professionally sympathetic, but ultimately indifferent. Of course it was. Of course Lucy owned the building. Of course she had been his landlord all along, probably subsidizing his rent without him knowing, making it possible for him to have an office in a neighborhood he could never have afforded on his own. He spent those 2 weeks boxing up his company, watching his employees scatter to other opportunities with apologies that sounded sincere but felt like abandonment. His business partner, Jerome, told him over coffee that tasted like dirt and regret that he had been offered a position elsewhere, somewhere stable, somewhere not sinking like the Titanic. I am sorry, man. I have a family to feed. I cannot go down with this ship. Jerome looked genuinely regretful, but he also looked relieved, and that stung worse than the words themselves. I understand, Angus said, because what else could he say? Stay and suffer with me? Drown alongside a man you barely respect? For what it is worth, I always thought Lucy was too good for you. She had this way of making everyone feel important, like they mattered. And you just took it for granted. Jerome stood up, leaving money on the table for both their coffees. Fix yourself, Angus, before you destroy another good woman. By the end of the month, Lovell Automotive Consulting existed only as a name on paperwork and a website that no one visited. Angus tried to find new office space, but discovered that his credit had somehow tanked overnight. Not because of late payments or debt, but because accounts he thought were in good standing had been closed. References he counted on were suddenly unavailable, and doors that used to open for him were now firmly shut. He felt like he was trying to walk through a world where all the roads had been quietly removed behind him, leaving him stranded on an island of his own making. The apartment eviction came next, swift and brutal. His landlord, Mrs. Pemberton, a sweet elderly woman who had always loved Lucy and often brought them homemade cookies that tasted like childhood and safety, knocked on his door with tears in her eyes. "Angus, dear, I am so sorry, but I have to ask you to leave. The building has been sold, and the new owner is converting everything to luxury units. They are buying out all the current leases." She handed him a check that was generous, more than fair, and a notice that gave him 30 days. "Who bought the building?" Angus asked, though he already knew. "Some investment company. Bourke something or other. They have been buying up properties all over the neighborhood. Real estate people say whoever runs it has an eye for potential." Mrs. Pemberton patted his arm sympathetically, oblivious to the irony of her words, oblivious to the fact that the person with an eye for potential was the wife he had cheated on. Angus took the check and felt like he was being paid to disappear from his own life. He moved into a smaller apartment across town, a place with thin walls where he could hear his neighbors arguing and cooking and living their messy lives. It smelled like cooking oil and old carpet and the faint tang of mildew that never quite went away, no matter how much he cleaned. It was all he could afford now that the money he thought was theirs had evaporated like morning mist. The joint account that he had assumed held their modest combined savings had indeed been closed. When he tried to access it, he found it had been empty for weeks. Every deposit Lucy made, every contribution she added over 12 years, had been quietly withdrawn and moved elsewhere. The only money in that account had been his own paycheck deposits, and they amounted to almost nothing. Apparently, he had been living off her money for years without ever realizing it. He was not broke, but he was close enough to see it from where he stood. His mother called one evening, her voice tight with an emotion Angus could not quite identify. Anger? Disappointment? Grief? "Angus, I need to talk to you about something. And I need you to listen, without interrupting." Diane Lovell had never been one for gentle lead-ins, so Angus braced himself for impact. She told him about her heart condition, the one from years ago, the surgery she needed that insurance refused to cover because they deemed it experimental and unnecessary. Angus vaguely remembered her being sick, but could not recall details. He had been so consumed with keeping his business afloat that his mother's health had been background noise, something happening in the periphery of his awareness. "I never told you this because the bills were paid before I could even worry about them. I thought it was some hospital charity program, some kind of miracle. But I got a letter this week from the cardiac center." Diane's voice wavered. "They have been thanking me for donations made in my name over the years. Donations totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars, Angus. Those donations were made by Lucy. Your wife, the one you cheated on, paid for my surgery. She saved my life. And she never told you because she knew you would feel inadequate." The phone nearly slipped from his hand. The room spun. "She paid for my surgery. She has been funding the entire cardiac care program that saved my life and the lives of 3 other patients since then. She did this without ever telling you, without ever asking for credit, without ever making me feel like I owed her anything." His mother's voice cracked completely. "She called me every week just to talk. She remembered my birthday. She sent me flowers when my garden club won that competition. She was more of a daughter to me than you were a son." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. "Mom, I did not know." "Of course you did not know. You were too busy looking at yourself to see anything else. That woman loved you with everything she had, and you threw her away for someone whose name I will not even say in my house." The disappointment in his mother's voice was worse than any anger could have been, worse than screaming or crying or hanging up. "I do not know what to do." "I do not know either. But if you do not figure it out, if you do not become someone better than this, you and I are going to have a very different kind of relationship going forward. I did not raise you to be cruel. I did not raise you to be selfish. But that is what you have become, and I am ashamed of you." She hung up before he could respond. Before he could apologize or explain or beg for forgiveness, Angus sat in his new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes that represented the collapsed ruins of his life, and tried to remember the last time he had asked Lucy about her day. Really asked, not just the automatic, "How was your day?" while scrolling through his phone or thinking about his own problems. He could not remember a single conversation in the past 2 years where he had been fully present with her, fully interested in her world beyond how it related to his needs. He thought about the nights she had stayed up late while he slept, and he had assumed she was watching television or reading trashy novels or wasting time. Had she been managing her empire? Had she been on calls with investors and partners and people who actually saw her worth? Had she been living an entire life in the margins of his awareness, building something extraordinary while he snored beside her? That night, Angus drafted an email to the law firm handling the divorce. He poured his heart into it, explaining that he understood he had been blind, that he wanted a chance to make things right, that he would do anything to talk to Lucy face to face. He spent 3 hours on that email, revising every word until it felt honest and raw and real, until his soul was laid bare on the page. The response came back in less than 10 minutes. "Mr. Lovell, Mrs. Bourke has made her position clear. She has no interest in communication at this time. Please limit all future correspondence to legal matters related to the dissolution of your marriage. Any further attempts to contact her directly will be documented and may result in a restraining order. This is your only warning. Sincerely, Whitmore and Associates." He read that email 30 times, each reading making him feel smaller and more pathetic. She would not even dignify his groveling with a personal response. He was being managed by assistants and lawyers, reduced to a problem to be solved rather than a person to be heard. And somewhere in the city, Lucy was probably not thinking about him at all. Chapter 4. The Mistress Who Craved Everything. Charlie Knott had imagined that Angus's wife leaving would feel like winning a prize, like crossing a finish line, like finally getting what she deserved. Instead, it felt like inheriting a burning house, like being handed a trophy that turned out to be made of garbage and lies. In the weeks after the confrontation, Angus became a ghost of himself. He barely spoke. He barely ate. He stared at his phone like it might suddenly ring with Lucy's voice, saying this was all a terrible mistake, all a bad dream, all a test that he had somehow passed instead of spectacularly failed. Charlie had moved herself into his new apartment without asking, assuming that now they could finally be together openly, finally show the world their relationship without hiding or sneaking around. But Angus looked at her like he was trying to remember who she was, like she was a stranger who had wandered into his life uninvited. "Can we talk about us?" Charlie asked one evening, trying to curl up next to him on the couch. He was watching some documentary about architecture that he clearly was not paying attention to, his eyes glazed and distant. "There is no us," Angus said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion. "There was never an us. There was just me being an idiot and you being convenient." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was still burning, still destroying everything in its path. Charlie recoiled as if slapped. "You do not mean that. You told me you loved me. You said Lucy did not understand you, that I was different, that we had something special. You said we had a connection." Angus finally looked at her, really looked at her, and his eyes were empty caves where a soul used to live. "I lied. I do not even know why I lied. Maybe because you were there. Maybe because you looked at me like I was impressive and important and worth something. Maybe because my wife stopped needing me, and you seemed to need me so desperately that it felt good to be wanted. But it was not love. It was not even close. You are just upset because she left. You will get over her. We can be happy together. We can build something real." Charlie heard the desperation in her own voice and hated it, hated herself for begging. "Get out." "What?" "Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. You were a symptom, not the disease. The disease was me, my weakness, my cowardice. But you are still a symptom I do not need anymore. Charlie stood up, her face flushing with humiliation and rage that felt like acid burning through her chest. You're making a huge mistake. I gave up things for you. I risked my reputation. You cannot just throw me away because your rich wife decided to finally show her true colors and walk away. That made Angus laugh, a harsh sound with no joy in it, no humanity. Her true colors are that she loved me enough to hide who she was for 12 years so I could feel like a man. Her true colors are that she saved my mother's life without telling me, without asking for recognition. Her true colors are building an empire while pretending to be happy shopping at thrift stores. What are your true colors, Charlie? Because from where I am sitting, you look like someone who goes after men who are not yours and thinks that makes you special instead of pathetic. Charlie grabbed her purse, her hands shaking with rage and shame and the dawning realization that she had played herself. You will regret this. When you are alone and broke and pathetic, you will wish you had someone who actually wanted to be with you. I already am alone and broke and pathetic. You being here just makes it worse. You are a reminder of my worst impulses, my weakest moment. Looking at you makes me sick. She slammed the door on her way out, and Angus felt absolutely nothing about her departure. Whatever he thought he felt for Charlie had evaporated the moment Lucy walked out of his office. Everything he thought he wanted turned to ash the second he lost everything he had. But Charlie was not done yet. Not with him. Not with this situation. Not with the narrative that made her look like a villain. She went home to her apartment and did what people do when they are hurt and angry and want to feel powerful. She posted on social media a long, detailed post about how she'd been seeing a married man who promised her the world, who said his wife did not understand him, who made her believe they had a future together. She painted herself as the victim, the other woman who had been deceived and used and tossed aside when things got complicated, when reality intruded on the fantasy. She did not name Angus directly, but she included enough details that anyone who knew her would know exactly who she was talking about. The post was artfully written, designed to generate sympathy, crafted to make her look like someone who had been wronged rather than someone who had helped do the wronging. The response was immediate and brutal, and nothing like what she expected. Someone, somewhere in the digital universe, had been waiting for this moment. Within an hour of her post going live, someone had created a side-by-side comparison that went viral. On one side was a photo Charlie had posted weeks ago of her and Angus at a cafe, his arm around her, looking cozy and coupled. On the other side was a photo of Lucy at some charity event, wearing a gown that probably cost more than Charlie made in 6 months, standing confidently among people who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. The caption read, "When you think you are trading up, but actually you are just the clearance bin special that nobody wanted anyway." The post went nuclear. Charlie's phone exploded with notifications. Thousands of comments poured in, and none of them were sympathetic. People called her a homewrecker. They called her delusional. They called her names that made her want to throw her phone across the room and never look at social media again. Someone had dug up her history, found photos of her with other men, other married men, and created an entire thread documenting a pattern of pursuing people who were not available. This is not the first marriage she tried to break up. Girl thought she won the prize but got the booby prize and the joke prize and the stupidity prize. Imagine thinking you are an upgrade from a literal billionaire. The delusion is real. The word billionaire jumped out at Charlie like a physical slap, like a punch to the throat. She started searching frantically for Lucy Bourke and found herself falling down a rabbit hole of articles, interviews, and profiles that made her want to vomit. This woman was not just wealthy. She was powerful. She was respected. She was everything Charlie had pretended to be in designer knockoffs and borrowed confidence. Except Lucy was the real deal, and Charlie had helped destroy her marriage. The realization made her feel sick, not because she cared about Lucy, but because she suddenly understood that she had made herself a villain in a story where she could never be the hero. She had attached herself to a man who was about to lose everything, and now she would be remembered forever as the woman stupid enough to pursue someone who was punching above his weight and did not even know it. Her boss called her into the office 2 days after the post went viral. The hotel where Charlie worked as an events coordinator had received a formal complaint from a client who refused to have Charlie involved in handling their upcoming event. The client was listed as Burke Capital Holdings, and their contract was worth more than Charlie's annual salary. Her boss, a middle-aged woman with no patience for drama or stupidity, told her she was being reassigned to less visible roles until the situation cooled down. "This is not fair," Charlie protested weakly. "My personal life should not affect my job. Your personal life became public when you posted about it online. And when a client as significant as Burke Capital makes a request, we honor it. Consider yourself lucky you are not being let go entirely. If this client pulls their contract because of you, you will be fired." Charlie left the office feeling like the walls were closing in, like the air was being squeezed out of her lungs. She tried calling Angus, thinking maybe they could at least commiserate, maybe find some solidarity in being destroyed by the same woman. But his number was disconnected. She tried going to his apartment, but when she knocked, a different person answered. A stranger who said Angus Lovell did not live there anymore. He had moved without telling her where he was going. She stood in the hallway, realizing that she had burned her reputation for a man who did not even consider her worth a goodbye, worth a forwarding address, worth anything at all. That night, Charlie sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through the comments that were still coming in on her viral post. And she understood something fundamental about herself that she had been avoiding for years. She was not special. She was not more deserving than other women. She had spent her entire adult life trying to take shortcuts to success, trying to attach herself to men with resources instead of building anything real herself. And now she was paying the price. Chapter 5. The Gala That Changed Everything. 3 months after Lucy walked out of his office, Angus received a package at his new apartment. It was delivered by courier, the kind of expensive service that required a signature and handled packages like they contained the crown jewels or nuclear secrets. Inside was an invitation printed on heavy cardstock with elegant lettering that probably cost more per square inch than his entire monthly rent. "You are invited to the annual Burke Foundation Gala benefiting women's education initiatives. Cocktail hour begins at 7. Formal attire required." There was a handwritten note paperclipped to the invitation, written on matching stationery that smelled faintly of lavender. "Mr. Lovell, Mrs. Burke has specifically requested your presence at this event. A car will collect you at 6:30 from your current residence. Attendance is mandatory. Refusal will result in immediate acceleration of all outstanding legal proceedings, including asset division and public disclosure of relevant facts. This is not a request. Regards, Priya Suresh, Executive Assistant to Mrs. Burke." Angus read the note 3 times, his stomach knotting into complex shapes that felt like nautical knots designed to strangle. Lucy wanted him at her gala. No, she demanded his presence. The threat was clear and legally sound and utterly terrifying. He had been dragging his feet on signing the divorce papers, hoping that if he delayed long enough, Lucy might change her mind, or at least agree to see him, to give him one chance to explain. This was her response: come to the gala or face consequences that would destroy what little remained of his life. He did not own formal attire anymore. The suit he used to wear to important meetings was years old and fit poorly after he had lost weight from stress and irregular meals and forgetting to eat because food tasted like cardboard and ashes. He went to a discount shop and bought the best he could afford. which was still obviously cheap to anyone with eyes. And on the night of the gala, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror, trying to make himself look like someone who belonged at an event for billionaires and socialites and people who mattered. He failed spectacularly. The car that arrived to pick him up was a sleek black sedan with leather seats that probably cost more than his monthly salary. The driver was professional and did not make small talk, which Angus appreciated, because he could not have managed conversation anyway. They drove through parts of the city Angus rarely saw anymore, where buildings were made of glass and ambition and money that multiplied itself while people slept. They pulled up to a hotel that looked like it belonged in a movie, about people whose problems were champagne not being cold enough or their yacht being the wrong size. A red carpet led to the entrance. Photographers lined the walkway. Angus felt like he was about to be fed to wolves dressed in evening gowns and tuxedos. "Mr. Lovell." A woman approached him as he stepped out of the car, moving with the kind of grace that suggested years of practice walking in heels. She was stunning in a navy blue dress, with dark hair pulled into a sleek bun, and eyes that assessed him like he was an interesting but slightly disappointing specimen under a microscope. "I am Priya Suresh. I will be escorting you inside. Please do not speak to any press, do not approach Mrs. Bork unless she addresses you first, and do not make a scene. Are we clear?" "Crystal," Angus muttered, his voice barely audible. Priya led him through the entrance, past the photographers who did not even bother taking his picture because he was clearly nobody worth documenting. Inside, the ballroom took his breath away. Chandeliers dripped crystal light onto marble floors that reflected everything like mirrors. Ice sculptures melted slowly on tables loaded with food that looked like art, like something too beautiful to eat. And everywhere, people in clothes that cost more than his rent moved through the space like they owned it, which they probably did, or would soon. Angus felt like a stain on an otherwise perfect canvas, like a mistake someone forgot to erase. "Stay here," Priya instructed, parking him near a wall like he was a piece of furniture. "Do not wander. Do not drink too much. Do not embarrass Mrs. Bork or yourself. Understood? Understood." Then she disappeared into the crowd, leaving Angus alone in a sea of people who all seemed to know each other, who all belonged in this world of wealth and power and casual elegance. He recognized some faces from television, from magazine covers, from the kind of success he used to fantasize about achieving back when he thought his small victories mattered. And then he saw Lucy. She stood at the center of a group near the stage, wearing a dress that was the color of deep red wine, cut in a way that was elegant without being revealing, sophisticated without trying too hard. Her hair was styled in soft waves that fell past her shoulders and caught the light like spun silk. Diamonds, real diamonds that caught the light like captured stars, hung from her ears and circled her throat. She was laughing at something a silver-haired man was saying, her hand resting lightly on his arm, her entire presence radiating confidence and joy and power. She looked like royalty. She looked nothing like the woman who used to make him sandwiches for lunch and pack them in reused plastic bags because she said it was wasteful to buy new ones. Angus could not look away. He watched her move through the crowd, greeting people with warmth, listening with genuine interest, commanding the room without ever raising her voice or demanding attention. People orbited around her like she was the sun, and they were desperate for her light. A woman in a green gown hugged Lucy and said something that made Lucy throw her head back and laugh. And the sound of that laugh hit Angus like a punch to the chest, because he could not remember the last time he had made her laugh like that. Free and unguarded and real, quite something, is she not? A man appeared beside Angus, holding 2 glasses of champagne and offering one. He was around Angus's age, with an easy smile and an expensive watch that caught the light. "First time at one of Lucy's events?" "Something like that," Angus said, accepting the champagne because he needed something to do with his hands. I am Rashid Adnan. I run a tech company that probably would not exist without her. Lucy invested in us when we were just an idea sketched on a napkin, when bigger investors laughed us out of their offices. She saved our lives, really. Believed in us when no one else did. Rashid gestured toward Lucy with his glass. She has this gift for seeing potential in people that others miss. It is like she has X-ray vision for the future, like she can see what something will become, instead of just what it is. Sounds like her, Angus said, his voice hollow and distant. Rashid studied Angus with new interest, recognition dawning in his eyes. Wait, you are the husband, are you not? Angus Lovell. I saw your name on the guest list and thought it was odd that Lucy would invite her ex. Or almost ex, I suppose. The divorce is not final yet, is it? She did not invite me. She summoned me? Ah, Rashid took a sip of his champagne, considering this. Well, for what it is worth, I met Lucy for the first time at an event like this, right after she invested in my company. I asked her why she took a chance on me when bigger investors passed, when people with more experience said my idea would never work. She said something I will never forget. She said she learned from someone important to her that people are more than their current circumstances. She said someone taught her that love means believing in potential even when it is not obvious to anyone else. Angus felt like he had been stabbed with something sharp and poisoned. She said that? She did. I always assumed she was talking about her mother, since she mentions her a lot in speeches and interviews. But maybe she meant someone else. Rashid looked at Angus with something that might have been pity mixed with curiosity. Must be strange, watching someone you knew become someone you never knew they were. Like discovering your wife was secretly a superhero and you never noticed the cape. Before Angus could respond, the lights dimmed and a spotlight hit the stage. Priya walked to the microphone with the confidence of someone who did this regularly, who was comfortable being the center of attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for the Bork Foundation Gala. Your generosity tonight will provide scholarships, mentorship, and resources for women pursuing education in fields where they have historically been underrepresented. Please welcome the founder of the Bork Foundation, Lucy Bork. The room erupted in applause that sounded like thunder, like worship, like love. Lucy walked to the stage with perfect posture and a smile that could have melted glaciers or started wars or built empires. She took the microphone and waited for the applause to die down before speaking, and when she did, her voice filled the room with absolute authority. Thank you all for being here. When I started this foundation, I wanted to create something that would honor my mother's memory and her belief that every person deserves to be seen for their full potential. Her voice was clear, confident, nothing like the soft-spoken woman Angus remembered who apologized for taking up space. My mother taught me that real power is not about what you have, but about what you give. And she taught me that sometimes we hide our light to make others comfortable, but hiding does not serve anyone. It does not serve the people who need to see what is possible, and it does not serve ourselves. Lucy paused, and for just a moment, her eyes swept the room and landed directly on Angus. Their gazes locked, and he felt the full weight of her presence crush him like gravity, like the ocean pressing down on a submarine. Like the universe collapsing into a single point, tonight we celebrate women who refuse to hide. Women who demand to be seen. Women who will not apologize for taking up space, or for being powerful, or for being more than someone else expected them to be. Lucy's smile did not waver, but her eyes did not leave Angus, pinning him in place. And we say to anyone who ever made these women feel small, whoever benefited from their silence, whoever took their gifts for granted, you underestimated us. And that is your loss, not ours. We are done being small. We are done being invisible. We are done pretending. And if you cannot handle us at our full power, then you never deserved us at all. The room exploded in applause again. Louder this time, standing ovation that went on for a full minute. Lucy thanked everyone, announced the fundraising total for the night, which was staggering, and made Angus want to cry, and then left the stage to be immediately surrounded by admirers who wanted to touch her, talk to her, bask in her presence. Angus stood frozen against the wall, feeling like he had just been publicly executed with kindness and elegance and the truth he had been avoiding. He wanted to leave. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to cease existing entirely. But Priya appeared at his side again, her hand firm on his elbow, like he was a prisoner being escorted. Mrs. Bourke would like a word. "Come with me." She led him through the crowd, through a side door, down a hallway lined with paintings that probably cost more than his entire life, and into a small private room that was quiet and elegantly furnished. Lucy was already there, standing by the window, her back to the door, still wearing that red dress that made her look like power incarnate. "You can go." "Priya," Lucy said without turning around. Priya left, closing the door behind her with a soft click that sounded final. Lucy and Angus stood in silence for a long moment. Then she turned to face him, and up close, without the crowd and the lights and the performance, she looked tired. Still beautiful, still powerful, but tired in a way that spoke of battles fought and prices paid and sleepless nights staring at ceilings wondering if any of this was worth it. "Why did you bring me here?" Angus asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because I needed you to see." Lucy gestured vaguely toward the door, toward the gala beyond it, toward the life she had built. "I needed you to see the person I have always been. Not the person I pretended to be for you, but the actual me. The one who builds things and leads people, and refuses to apologize for existing at full volume. Lucy, I am so sorry. If I could go back and change everything—" "You cannot." Her voice was not angry. It was just factual, just stating truth like she was reading from a script. "And I do not want you to go back. I do not want to be the woman I was when I was with you. That woman made herself small, and it was killing her slowly. You just accelerated the process. I did not know you were suffering. That is the problem, Angus. You never wanted to know. You wanted a wife who supported you, who believed in you, who made you feel capable and important. And I did all of that. I did it so well that you never questioned it. But you never once asked what I needed. You never once wondered if maybe I had dreams too, if maybe I was capable of more than being your cheerleader." Lucy walked closer, and Angus resisted the urge to back away. "I could have told you any time. I know that, but I wanted you to love me first. I wanted to know that you could love me when you thought I was ordinary. Because if you could not love me then, you definitely could not love me now. I did love you. I do love you." "No!" Lucy shook her head, and the movement made her earrings catch the light and throw sparkles across the wall like tiny stars dying. "You loved the idea of me. You loved having someone who made you feel important. But you did not love me. Because if you did, you would have been curious about me. You would have noticed when I stopped smiling. You would have seen me fading and done something about it instead of finding comfort in someone else's arms." Angus felt tears on his face and did not care. "What can I do? Tell me what to do to fix this. I will do anything. There is nothing to fix. There is only the lesson. And the lesson is this. I am taking back my life. I am taking back my power. And you are going to watch from a distance while I build something extraordinary without you." Lucy reached into a small clutch she had been holding and pulled out an envelope. "These are the final divorce papers. Sign them, return them, and then we can both move forward. I do not want to move forward. I want to go back." "That is not an option." Lucy handed him the envelope and walked toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle and looked back at him one last time, and her eyes held something that might have been sadness, or might have been relief, or might have been both. "You wanted to know what I think? I think you're finally starting to understand what you lost. I think that is going to hurt for a very long time, and I think that is exactly what you deserve. Not because I want revenge, but because pain is the only teacher you will listen to. So learn from it. Become someone better, And maybe someday you will be worthy of someone as extraordinary as you thought I was ordinary." She left him alone in that room, with the unsigned papers and the crushing realization that he had been given a chance to see her, really see her, truly see her, and he had chosen blindness instead because seeing would have required him to change, and change was harder than comfort. Chapter 6. The Mother's Unbearable Truth. Diane Lovell had always prided herself on raising a good man, a kind man, a man who treated people with respect and dignity. She taught Angus to open doors for others, to say please and thank you, to value people for their character rather than their bank accounts. So when she drove 3 hours to visit him in his cramped apartment that smelled like old carpets and regret and the faint mildew of defeat, she was prepared to be disappointed. What she was not prepared for was the hollow-eyed stranger who answered the door, looking like he had not slept in weeks. "Mum, you did not tell me you were coming. If I had told you, you would have made excuses. You would have said you were busy or sick or that the timing was bad. So I did not tell you. I simply came." Diane pushed past him into the apartment and immediately started opening windows because the air was stale and thick. "Good Lord, Angus, when was the last time you let in fresh air? This place smells like sadness and failure and a man who has given up on himself. That is probably because it is full of all those things." Angus closed the door and slumped onto his couch, which was also his bed because the apartment was a studio and he could not afford anything larger, anything with actual rooms that separated sleeping from living. Diane surveyed the space with a mother's critical eye that missed nothing. Dishes piled in the sink, crusty with old food, laundry overflowing from a basket that had probably been full for weeks, empty takeout containers on every surface. This was not how she raised him. This was not the man she thought she knew. "We need to talk. If this is about Lucy, I do not want to hear it. I have heard enough." "Too bad. Because I am going to say it anyway, and you are going to sit there and listen like the grown man you are supposed to be." Diane sat down across from him and folded her hands in her lap, gathering her thoughts like ammunition. "I went to the cardiac center for my checkup. You remember my heart condition, do you not? Or were you too busy with your life to remember that your mother almost died?" Angus flinched. "I remember. You said you were doing better. I'm doing wonderfully. My heart is strong. The doctor says I should have many years left in me." And then he thanked me for my continued support of their program. I had no idea what he was talking about. So I asked, "And do you know what he told me?" Angus shook his head, already dreading the answer. "He told me that for the past 8 years, donations have been made in my name to the Cardiac Care Fund. Significant donations, Angus. Enough to cover surgeries for multiple patients, to buy new equipment, to hire additional staff, to create a program that saves lives. I assumed it was some kind of mistake or a tax thing the hospital was doing for publicity. But then I got a letter." She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her purse and handed it to Angus. He opened it with shaking hands that could barely hold the paper steady. It was from the hospital's development director, thanking Diane for her generosity and noting that her contributions, facilitated through Bork Capital Holdings, had been instrumental in saving lives and advancing cardiac care. "Lucy did this?" Angus's voice cracked like ice breaking. "Lucy did this," Diane confirmed, her voice hard as stone. "She paid for my surgery when you thought it was covered by some charity program. I was dying, Angus. Do you even remember that? Do you remember how scared I was? How the doctors said I needed this procedure and insurance would not cover it because they deemed it experimental? I was ready to die. I had made peace with it. I had written letters to you and your sister. And then suddenly, miraculously, the bills were paid. Someone anonymous covered everything. I thought it was luck. I thought it was grace. I thought it was anything except what it actually was. I remember you being sick. I remember being stressed about the company and not having time to visit as much as I should have." Angus trailed off. The reality of that sentence hitting him like a physical blow, like being punched in the gut and the face simultaneously. You did not have time to be there for your dying mother because you were too busy worrying about your business. A business that Lucy was holding together with invisible hands, while you took all the credit and patted yourself on the back for being such a talented entrepreneur. Diane's voice was sharp now, cutting through the fog of self-pity that had been Angus's constant companion for months. That woman saved my life. She saved me, and she never asked for recognition. She never told you because she knew you would feel guilty or inadequate or whatever it is men feel when women are more capable than they are. She did it because she loved you, and loving you meant loving your family. She became my daughter in all the ways that mattered. I did not know, Angus whispered, the same pathetic excuse he had been clinging to like a life raft in a stormy sea. Stop saying that. Diane's voice rose, something she rarely allowed herself, something she saved for moments when words were not enough and volume became necessary. Not knowing is only an excuse if you were prevented from knowing. But you were not prevented. You were indifferent. There is a difference, and it is an important one. You could have asked Lucy about her day and actually listened to the answer. You could have wondered where the money came from when things mysteriously got better. You could have been curious about your own wife, about the woman you promised to love and honor. But you were not, because you were too in love with yourself to notice anyone else. The words landed like blows, each one true and terrible and impossible to defend against. She used to call me every week, Diane continued, her voice softer now but no less devastating. No less brutal in its honesty. Every single week for 12 years, she would ask about my garden, my book club, my health, my friends. She remembered the names of everyone I talked about. She sent flowers when my roses won that competition. She mailed me recipes she thought I would like. She was more attentive than my own son, and she did not even share my blood. When she stopped calling after you destroyed your marriage, I noticed immediately. The silence was deafening. I called her, you know. I called that law firm and begged them to let me speak to her. I wanted to apologize on your behalf. I wanted her to know that you did not represent the whole family, that some of us still had values. What did she say? Angus asked desperately, leaning forward like a drowning man reaching for anything solid. She sent me a letter, a handwritten letter that I will treasure for the rest of my life, that I have read 100 times. Diane pulled out another folded paper, this one more worn, clearly read many times. The creases soft from being opened and closed. She handed it to Angus. He recognized Lucy's handwriting immediately, the careful loops and precise letters that looked like calligraphy. Dear Diane, thank you for reaching out. Your kindness over the years has meant more to me than you will ever know or understand. You have been the mother I lost, and leaving Angus means losing you too, which is its own kind of grief, its own kind of death. But I cannot stay small anymore. I cannot keep pretending. Your son needed someone to believe in him, and I did. I believed so hard and so constantly that I forgot to believe in myself. That is not his fault alone. I made that choice. I chose to hide. But I am making a different choice now. I hope you can forgive me for leaving your family. And I hope someday Angus can forgive himself for what he threw away. With love always, Lucy. Angus read the letter 3 times, his vision blurring with tears he no longer bothered to wipe away. Lucy was grieving losing his mother. She was grieving the family she had been part of, the connections she had built over 12 years, the life she had created around him. And she still chose to leave because staying was killing her slowly, suffocating her inch by inch. I do not know how to fix this, Angus said, his voice breaking completely, shattering into pieces. Maybe you cannot fix it. Maybe it is not supposed to be fixed. Maybe some things, once broken, stay broken. Diane took the letter back and folded it carefully, reverently. Maybe the lesson here is not about getting her back. Maybe it is about becoming someone who deserved her in the first place, and carrying that forward, becoming that person, even though she will never see it. I do not want to carry it forward without her. Then you are not listening. You are still making this about you and what you want. Diane stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Lucy is not coming back, Angus. She has moved on. She is building a life that does not include you, a life where she gets to be seen and valued and powerful. And you need to accept that. Not because you are giving up on her, but because she deserves to be free of you orbiting around her like a sad planet, hoping to be pulled back into her gravity. Wooden. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that I destroyed the best thing in my life and move on like it does not matter? Grow up. Get therapy. Figure out why you needed to feel superior to the woman you married. Why you could only love someone when you thought they needed you. Become someone who, if given another chance with another person someday, will not make the same catastrophic mistakes. Diane turned back to face him, her expression softening slightly. And sign the divorce papers. Stop holding her hostage with your guilt. Let her go. If you ever loved her at all, let her go. If I sign them, it is really over. Permanently. It is already really over. It has been over since the moment she walked into your office and saw you with that woman. The papers are just making it official, just giving it legal weight. Diane walked to the door and paused with her hand on the knob. I'm not cutting you out of my life, Angus. You are my son, and I love you. But I am deeply disappointed in you, and I will not pretend otherwise just to make you feel better. If you want to rebuild our relationship, you need to rebuild yourself first. Become someone I can be proud of again. She left, and Angus sat alone in his apartment with 2 letters that told the story of a woman who loved too much and a man who noticed too little. He pulled out the divorce papers Lucy had given him at the gala, the ones he had been avoiding for weeks, refusing to sign because signing meant accepting it was over. Not signing meant being the kind of person who forced a woman to fight for freedom she had already earned, freedom she deserved. He found a pen buried under junk mail and stared at the signature line for a long time. His hand hovered over the paper. Signing felt like cutting off his own arm, like amputating a part of himself that would never grow back. But keeping Lucy trapped in a legal marriage because he was too cowardly to face reality was worse than losing her. He signed his name. Then he called the law firm and told them the papers would be delivered that day by courier. If loving Lucy meant anything, it meant letting her go. It meant giving her the freedom to be everything she was without him holding her back. Chapter 7. The Girl Who Thought She Won the Prize. Charlie Knott lasted exactly 3 months and 2 weeks in her new city, before realizing that running away from a reputation was impossible when the internet existed forever, when digital footprints never faded, when one viral moment could define your entire existence. She had moved to a different state, found a job at a smaller hotel, cut her hair, changed her style, tried to start fresh like people do in movies when they want to escape their past. But her name was Googleable, searchable, eternally documented. Her viral moment was immortalized in screenshots and forums dedicated to drama and schadenfreude and the peculiar pleasure people take in watching others fail spectacularly. The new co-workers who seemed friendly at first, who invited her to lunch and asked about her previous work, became distant once they connected her face to the story that had spread across social media like wildfire. Whispers followed her through hallways. Invitations to after-work drinks mysteriously never materialized. People stopped making eye contact. She became invisible in the worst way, visible only as a cautionary tale, as the punchline to a joke she did not find funny. She lasted 6 weeks at the new job before being quietly let go, the official reason being restructuring and budget concerns, the real reason being that she made people uncomfortable. that her presence reminded everyone of messy personal lives, and poor choices and the consequences of wanting things that belong to other people. Her boss, a man who looked at her like she was something unpleasant stuck to his shoe, told her that hotel work required discretion and trust, and given her very public history, they felt it was best to part ways. "But I am good at my job," Charlie protested weakly, knowing it would not matter. Being good at the job is not enough when the job requires people to trust you with their events, their special moments, and frankly, your reputation suggests you cannot be trusted with other people's relationships. How can we trust you with their weddings? The logic was flawed, but she had no defense. Charlie moved back home to her mother's house, a humiliation that tasted like ash and failure and childhood bedrooms that still smelled like cheap perfume and broken dreams. Her mother, Brenda Knott, was a louder, cruder version of Charlie herself, a woman who had spent her life pursuing men with money and ended up with nothing but stories and regrets and a house that needed repairs she could not afford. She greeted her daughter's return with a mixture of sympathy and irritation, and the particular kind of disappointment that comes from seeing yourself reflected in your child's mistakes. "I told you to be smarter about these things. You do not get caught. That is rule number 1. The second rule is make sure he actually has money before you blow up his marriage." Brenda chain-smoked on the porch and dispensed wisdom that was really just warnings wrapped in lipstick-stained cigarettes and bitter experience. "It was not supposed to go like this," Charlie said one evening, helping her mother fold laundry that smelled like cheap detergent and disappointment. "He told me he was unhappy. He told me his wife did not appreciate him, did not understand him, did not see him. He made it sound like I was rescuing him from a bad situation." "They all say that, honey. Every man who cheats says his wife does not understand him. It is in the handbook they all read. It is the script they follow." Brenda shook out a bedsheet, with more violence than necessary, snapping it like a whip. "The trick is to get the ring before the wife figures it out. You jumped in too early. Should have waited until the divorce was filed, until the papers were signed, before going public with your relationship." She was wealthy. I did not know how wealthy until it was too late. Until everyone knew. Brenda laughed, a harsh bark of sound that held no humor, just the accumulated bitterness of a lifetime of bad choices. Of course she was. Why else would he stay married? Men do not leave money, sweetie. They might cheat on it, they might resent it, but they do not leave it willingly. Money is more important than love to most men. Charlie thought about this, about the photos she had seen of Lucy at galas and conferences, looking powerful and untouchable and everything Charlie had ever wanted to be. She thought about Angus, who had looked at her with contempt in their last conversation, like she was garbage he was finally taking out, like she was a mistake he was correcting. And she felt something shift inside her, something ugly and mean and desperate. "I should go to the press," Charlie said suddenly, the idea forming as she spoke. "Tell my side of the story. Make her look like the villain, rich wife who ignored her husband while she built her empire, who drove him into another woman's arms through neglect. Make people see that she is not perfect." Brenda stopped folding and looked at her daughter with an expression that was almost impressed, almost proud in a terrible way. "You could try, but that woman has lawyers that eat people like you for breakfast and spit out the bones before lunch. And honestly, baby, you do not come off great in any version of this story. You were the other woman. That is never a winning position. That is always the villain role. So I just let her destroy my life. Just accept that I am ruined because of her." "She did not destroy your life. You destroyed your own life by thinking you could win against someone who was already 10 steps ahead, already playing a game you did not even know existed." Brenda lit another cigarette and blew smoke toward the ceiling in a long stream. Lucy Burke did not need to come after you. She just removed her protection, stopped shielding you from consequences, and you collapsed under your own weight. That is not her being cruel. That is just gravity. That is just reality catching up with you. The words stung because they were true, because they cut through all the excuses and justifications and landed on something Charlie had been avoiding. Lucy had never confronted her directly, never sent threatening letters or hired people to sabotage her or spread rumors about her. Lucy had simply stepped back and let Charlie's own choices catch up with her, let the universe do what the universe does to people who break things that do not belong to them. The viral post, the damaged reputation, the lost jobs, all of that was Charlie's doing. Lucy had just refused to shield her from the consequences, refused to extend protection that Charlie had never earned and did not deserve. Charlie spent the next few weeks spiraling through job applications that went nowhere and social media accounts that she checked compulsively even though they only made her feel worse, even though every scroll brought fresh evidence of her own irrelevance. She saw updates about Lucy, about the foundation, about new ventures and success stories, and women being empowered. She saw Angus exactly once, in a photo someone had posted from the gala. He was in the background, barely visible, looking lost and small among people who belonged there, people who mattered. He looked exactly how Charlie felt. One evening, scrolling through yet another article praising Lucy for her investment strategy and philanthropic work and commitment to lifting up other women, Charlie came across a quote that made her stop breathing, made her screen blur with tears. She did not know she was crying. Someone asked me recently how I decide who to invest in, how I choose which people and companies to support. The truth is, I look for people who have been underestimated, people who have potential that others cannot see or refuse to acknowledge. But I also look for integrity, because potential without integrity is just ambition, and ambition without integrity will always destroy itself eventually. You cannot build anything lasting on a foundation of lies and shortcuts and taking what is not yours. Charlie read that quote 7 times, and each time it felt like Lucy was speaking directly to her, directly through her, seeing into the core of who she was and finding it lacking. Ambition without integrity. That was Charlie. She had wanted the lifestyle, the status, the feeling of being special and chosen and important. But she had been willing to get it through deception and broken promises and attaching herself to someone else's life instead of building her own. She had thought that made her clever. Lucy was calling it what it really was, hollow and unsustainable and doomed to collapse. "I need to do something," Charlie said to her mother that night, surprising herself with the words. "Like what? Get a job? Join the real world? Accept that you are not special? Like apologize? Like own what I did instead of making excuses? Like becoming someone who does not need to steal other people's lives because she is too lazy or scared to build her own?" Brenda actually choked on her cigarette, coughing and sputtering. "Apologize to who? That woman will not give you forgiveness. She will probably laugh at you or ignore you or have her lawyers send you a cease and desist letter. I do not need her forgiveness. I just need to say it. For me. For my own soul." Charlie grabbed her laptop and opened a fresh document. She started typing. Slowly at first, then faster, words pouring out that she had been holding inside for months. An apology. A real one. Not an excuse or a justification or a plea for sympathy, but an actual acknowledgement of harm caused, of lives damaged, of the ripple effects of selfish choices. She wrote about how she had convinced herself that pursuing a married man was acceptable because he seemed unhappy, because he paid attention to her, because being wanted felt better than being alone. She wrote about how she had ignored all the signs that she was part of a betrayal, not a romance, not a rescue mission. She wrote about how watching Lucy succeed from a distance had made her realize that she had spent her whole life trying to take shortcuts to success instead of building anything real, anything that could not be taken away the moment someone stopped protecting her from consequences. When she finished, she had 3 pages that were raw and honest and humiliating to read. She printed them, addressed an envelope to Lucy Bork, care of Bork Capital Holdings, and mailed it before she could change her mind, before fear or pride could stop her from doing the first honest thing she had done in years. She did not expect a response. She did not need one. The act of writing it, of being honest about her own ugliness, felt like lancing a wound that had been festering. But 3 weeks later, a letter arrived at her mother's house on expensive stationery with Lucy's name embossed at the top in elegant script. Ms. Knott, I received your letter. I appreciate the courage it took to write it, to be honest about your role in what happened. What you did was wrong, but you are correct that you cannot change the past. What you can change is the future. I have no interest in a relationship with you, but I will say this. If you are serious about rebuilding your life, start by building something instead of taking from others. Integrity is not something you are born with. It is something you choose every day, with every decision, with every moment where the easy path and the right path diverge. I hope you choose it from now on. Sincerely, Lucy Bork. Charlie read the letter sitting on her mother's porch and she cried. Not because Lucy forgave her, because the letter made clear that forgiveness was not on offer. But because Lucy believed she could do better, could become someone different, could choose differently going forward. And that small piece of belief from a woman she had wronged terribly felt like a lifeline thrown to someone drowning. She got a job at a coffee shop 2 days later. Minimum wage, 0 prestige, but honest work that required showing up and doing what you promised. She started saving money in a real bank account instead of spending it on clothes and makeup designed to attract men with resources. She started therapy with a sliding scale counselor who told her uncomfortable truths about herself and did not accept excuses. And slowly, painfully, like learning to walk after being bedridden, she started becoming someone who was not defined by her worst choice, who could look at herself in the mirror without flinching. She would never be friends with Lucy. She would never undo what she helped break. But maybe, someday, years from now, she could look at herself and see someone with integrity, someone who built instead of stole. That would have to be enough. Chapter 8. The Man Who Worked for His Wife. 8 months after signing the divorce papers, after accepting that his marriage was truly over and never coming back, Angus received a certified letter that changed everything again. It was from Bork Capital Holdings, and it contained a job offer that was both an opportunity and a humiliation wrapped in professional language and legal precision. The position was vague, something about consulting services and client relations, with a salary that was exactly enough to live on, but not enough to feel comfortable or successful. The letter included a personal note from someone named Priya Suresh, typed on expensive letterhead that smelled faintly of success. Mr. Lovell, Lucy Bork has decided to offer you a position within our organization. This is not an act of kindness or charity. This is an opportunity for you to understand what it means to be valued only for your output rather than your potential, to be judged on your work rather than your charm or your history. You will be expected to work hard, to meet high standards that will not be lowered for you, and to exist in an environment where your history with Mrs. Bork is known but irrelevant to your job performance. If you accept this position, you will report directly to our consulting division and will have no direct contact with Mrs. Bork unless she initiates it, which she almost certainly will not. Your choice. You have 48 hours to respond. Angus sat with that letter for 2 days, staring at it like it was a puzzle he could not solve. His pride screamed at him to refuse. How could he work for his ex-wife? How could he show up every day to a place where everyone knew he had failed her, where his shame was public knowledge. But his practical side, the part that was tired of struggling, of eating ramen and canned soup, of watching his life crumble into dust, whispered that this was a lifeline he could not afford to refuse. He accepted 47 hours and 53 minutes after receiving the letter. His first day at Bork Capital was designed to humble him, to strip away whatever remained of his ego and self-importance. His office was small, windowless, tucked in a corner near the copy machines and the break room where people gathered to gossip. His supervisor was a woman named Natasha Quinn, who was exactly his age and about 10 times more accomplished, who had built her career through actual merit rather than connections and charm. She greeted him with professional courtesy and zero warmth, her handshake firm and brief. "Welcome to the team. You will be working on client reports, data analysis, market research, and whatever else needs doing. We have high standards here that everyone is expected to meet. No exceptions, no special treatment. Questions?" "No questions," Angus said, because what could he ask? "Can you make this less humiliating? Can you pretend I matter?" He spent that first week drowning in work that was simultaneously boring and demanding, requiring attention to detail, but offering zero creativity or prestige or opportunity to shine. He compiled reports, analyzed trends, formatted documents according to strict style guides, all tasks that required precision but offered no room for personality or flair. He was a cog in a machine that ran smoothly without him and would run smoothly if he disappeared tomorrow. It was humbling in a way he had never experienced, in a way that stripped him down to bare essentials and forced him to confront what he actually contributed when charm and connections were removed from the equation. The people around him knew who he was. He caught whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms. He heard the edge of gossip that painted him as the idiot who cheated on a billionaire, the fool who threw away everything. But no one was outright cruel. They just treated him like he was invisible unless they needed something from him, like he was furniture that occasionally proved useful. And then there was Lucy. He saw her exactly once in his first month. She walked through the office like she owned it, which she did, surrounded by people asking questions and seeking approval and hanging on her every word. She wore a black suit that made her look like she could negotiate world peace before lunch and solve global poverty before dinner. Her hair was pulled back in a way that highlighted the sharp intelligence in her eyes and the regal line of her neck. She glanced in his direction for half a second, registered his existence with about as much interest as she would give a potted plant or a fire extinguisher, and kept walking without breaking stride. That half-second of indifference hurt more than anger would have, more than hate or contempt or any active emotion. He was nothing to her now. Less than nothing. Background noise. Angus worked harder, not because he thought it would win Lucy back, but because he had nothing else to fill his days, no other identity to cling to. His evenings were empty. His friends, such as they were, had drifted away like smoke. His mother called weekly to check on him, but the conversations were brief and surface level, lacking the warmth they used to have. He had become a man defined entirely by the job he did for the woman he destroyed. 3 months in, he was assigned to a project that required attending a meeting with Lucy present. His stomach knotted when he saw the calendar invitation appear in his inbox. The meeting was about expanding services to a new client, some major corporation that wanted consulting services. And Angus had been pulling data for weeks, analyzing every angle, preparing comprehensive reports. When the day came, he walked into the conference room with his laptop and his meticulously prepared notes and tried to be invisible, tried to blend into the walls and furniture. Lucy sat at the head of the table, flanked by executives who clearly worshipped her, who hung on her every word like she was dispensing gospel truth. She was in the middle of explaining her vision for the client relationship when he entered. speaking with clarity and passion that made him remember why he had fallen in love with her in the first place, back when he thought he knew her. "Angus, you pulled the client history data, correct?" Natasha asked, pulling him from his thoughts. "Yes." He opened his laptop and pulled up the presentation he had prepared. The slides he had revised 17 times to make sure every number was accurate, every recommendation backed by solid evidence. "I compiled the last 5 years of similar client profiles, success rates, and potential risk factors based on industry trends and market analysis." He presented his findings, keeping his voice steady, his data clear, his conclusions logical. He had worked on this presentation for weeks, staying late every night, making sure every detail was perfect, and when he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Lucy looked at him for the first time, with something other than indifference, her expression unreadable. "This is solid work. Well-researched, clearly presented, thorough. I'm impressed." The compliment felt like sunlight after months of darkness, like water after days in a desert. But it also felt distant, professional, not personal in any way that mattered. "Thank you," Angus said, his voice carefully neutral. The meeting continued, and Lucy made decisions with confidence, incorporating his data into her strategy, trusting his analysis. When it ended, everyone filed out except Angus, who was packing up his laptop slowly, trying to process what had just happened, trying to understand if the compliment meant anything beyond professional acknowledgement. "Angus," Lucy's voice stopped him. She was still seated, looking at him, with an expression he could not quite read, something between curiosity and calculation. "Can we talk for a moment?" His heart hammered. "Of course." Lucy waited until the door closed and they were alone, the silence heavy between them. "I know this has been difficult for you. Working here, seeing me, existing in a space where everyone knows what happened between us. I want you to know that I did not hire you to torture you or to keep you close as some kind of power play." "Then why did you hire me?" "Because I wanted you to see what it feels like to be valued only for what you produce, not for who you are or what potential people see in you." Lucy stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "You valued me for what I did for you, for how I supported you, believed in you, made you feel capable. But you never valued me for who I was, as a person separate from you, independent of you. I wanted you to experience that, to understand how hollow it feels to be reduced to your utility. It feels terrible," Angus admitted, his voice rough with emotion he could not hide. "Like I do not exist except as a function, as a tool." "Good. Then you are learning. Then you are understanding what I felt for years." Lucy turned back to face him, her expression softening slightly, but not enough to offer hope. "That work you did for today's meeting was excellent. It was the kind of work I needed, presented well with care and precision. That is what I value from you now. Not your charm or your history with me or your potential, but your ability to do a job well. Your ability to contribute something real. Is that all I will ever be to you now? Just an employee? Just someone who produces reports?" Lucy considered this for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for something he could not name. "I do not know yet. Right now, I am rebuilding my life into something that makes me happy, something that does not require me to be small or hidden or less than I am. And part of that means not carrying people who drain me, who take more than they give. You drained me for 12 years, Angus. You drank from me until I was empty. And you never thought to ask if I needed filling up too." "I was an idiot. I was blind and selfish and stupid." "Yes, you were. But you are becoming less of one. I see you working hard, keeping your head down, not asking for special treatment or expecting recognition beyond what you earn. That is growth. Whether that growth leads anywhere beyond professional competence remains to be seen." She gathered her things and walked toward the door, pausing to look back at him one final time. "Keep doing good work. Not for me, not to win me back or prove something. Do it for yourself. Because the man you were when we were married would never have put in the effort you just did on that project. He would have delegated it or half done it while taking credit. But you did it yourself, and you did it well. That is who you need to become. Someone who creates value instead of just taking it. She left him alone in the conference room, and Angus sat down heavily in one of the chairs, his whole body feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He had just been told he was doing well, but it did not feel like praise. It felt like observation, like a scientist taking notes on an experiment that might or might not succeed. Lucy was watching him, measuring him, seeing if the man who destroyed their marriage could become someone better, someone worthy. He did not know if he could. But for the first time since she walked out, he wanted to try. Not just to win her back, though he would be lying if he said that was not part of it, but to win back his own self-respect, to become someone he could look at in the mirror without flinching. That would have to be enough for now. Chapter 9. The Life She Built Without Him. Lucy Bourke stood in the main conference room of her headquarters, looking out at the skyline she had helped shape with investments and vision and belief in people others overlooked, and felt something she had not felt in years, complete peace that came from alignment between who she was and how she lived. Her therapist, Dr. Yolanda Reeves, had told her that peace was not the absence of pain, but the presence of alignment, of congruence between inner truth and outer expression, when who you are matches how you live. When you stop performing and start being, that is when you find peace. That is when you stop fighting yourself. Lucy had spent the past year aligning herself, shedding the costume of the struggling wife like a snake shedding old skin, stepping fully into the power she had always possessed, but kept hidden like a shameful secret. She thought about Angus working 3 floors below her, probably still at his desk, because he had become the kind of employee who stayed late to perfect his work, who put in effort nobody asked for, but everyone appreciated. She had not lied when she told him she was impressed with his project. He was changing in ways that seemed genuine, seemed rooted in something deeper than performance. She could see it in the quality of his work, in the way he interacted with colleagues without seeking special treatment, in the absence of the ego that used to color everything he did like a stain that would not wash out. But seeing him change did not undo what he had done. Watching someone become better did not erase the damage they caused when they were worse. Priya walked into the conference room with an iPad and a knowing look that suggested she had news Lucy would find either amusing or annoying. "Your mother-in-law called." "Well, former mother-in-law, Diane wants to know if you are coming to her birthday dinner next month." Lucy smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. She had reconnected with Diane through letters and phone calls after the divorce, building something new that was not based on Lucy being Angus's wife, but on genuine affection between 2 women who respected each other, who saw each other clearly. "Tell her I will be there, and that I am bringing someone." Priya raised an eyebrow, intrigue clear on her face. "Someone? Like a date someone?" "A friend. Rashid Adnan, the tech entrepreneur. He has been asking me to dinner for months, and I keep saying no because I am not ready for anything romantic. But maybe I am ready to be not ready in a different way, to start exploring what it might feel like to be seen by someone new." Lucy laughed at her own convoluted logic. "I do not know if it will go anywhere, but I am willing to try. That feels like growth." "Good for you," Priya said genuinely, her voice warm with approval. She had been with Lucy through the divorce, through the rebuilding, through the dark nights of questioning whether any of this was worth it. She had become more than an assistant. She was a friend, a confidant, someone who knew Lucy's full story. You deserve someone who sees you for who you actually are, not who they want you to be. I am not sure I want someone yet, but I am open to the possibility. That feels revolutionary, after spending 12 years being invisible. They worked for another hour on upcoming projects, expansions, new ventures that excited Lucy in a way her marriage never had, never could have. This work, this building of systems and opportunities, this creating something meaningful that would outlast her, filled her in ways she had tried to get from being a wife. She loved the challenge of finding potential in unlikely places. She loved the mentorship she provided to young women starting their own ventures. She loved being visible, being seen, being known for what she actually was. That evening, Lucy attended a panel discussion at a local university where she was one of 3 speakers on the topic of women in leadership and the cost of visibility. The auditorium was packed with students hungry for wisdom, for roadmaps, for permission to be ambitious without apology. Lucy spoke honestly about the cost of hiding, about the years she spent pretending to be less capable than she was, about the moment she chose herself over being chosen, about walking away from comfort into uncertainty. During the question session, a young woman in the 3rd row raised her hand with visible nervousness. How do you know when to fight for a relationship and when to walk away? How do you know when something is worth saving? The audience went silent, sensing this was not just about professional relationships, sensing the weight of personal pain behind the question. Lucy thought for a long moment before answering, gathering her thoughts like precious stones. You fight when the relationship makes you more yourself, when it expands you rather than contracts you. You walk away when it requires you to be less, when you find yourself getting smaller to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold you. I spent 12 years being less, smaller, quieter, dimmer, and I told myself it was love, that sacrifice was noble, that making myself small was a gift I was giving. But it was not sacrifice, it was erasure. And when I finally walked away, I did not feel brave. I felt like I was breathing for the first time in years, like my lungs were finally expanding to full capacity. She paused, making eye contact with the young woman who had asked the question. So my advice is this: if a relationship makes you hold your breath, if you find yourself constantly shrinking to fit, walk away. You deserve to breathe. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to be seen at your actual size, not the miniature version you create to make someone else comfortable. The applause was thunderous, sustained, echoing off the walls like a physical force. After the panel, Lucy was surrounded by students wanting to thank her, to ask follow-up questions, to tell her their own stories of feeling small in relationships and workplaces and families. She stayed for over an hour, listening to each one with genuine attention, offering encouragement and contact information for her foundation's mentorship program. This was what filled her now: connection, purpose, being seen and seeing others in return, building something that would help other women avoid the mistakes she made, the years she wasted hiding. She drove home late, to the penthouse apartment she had bought for herself when the divorce finalized, all glass and light and space to breathe and be big. She poured a glass of wine and sat on her balcony looking at the city lights, thinking about the past year and the woman she had become. She had destroyed Angus's life, not out of cruelty but out of necessity. She needed him to understand what he had lost. She needed him to feel what she felt. But she also needed to rebuild herself, to remember who she was before she became his supporting character, and she had done it. Her phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Looking forward to dinner next month. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Not for leaving my son, but for finding yourself again. For choosing to breathe. Lucy responded with a heart emoji and a promise to bring her famous dessert, the one Diane had always loved. Another text came through, this one from Rashid. Still on for coffee tomorrow? I promise not to talk about funding or investments or work. Just coffee and conversation between 2 people who might enjoy each other's company. Lucy hesitated, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She was not ready for a relationship. She was not sure she would ever be ready again. The idea of trusting someone, of being vulnerable, of risking that kind of pain, it terrified her in ways that business risk never did. But maybe coffee was not about being ready. Maybe it was just about being open to possibility, about not closing doors out of fear. "Coffee sounds good," she typed back. "Just coffee. Just conversation. Just seeing what happens." She finished her wine and went to bed, and for the first time in years she fell asleep without thinking about Angus at all, without replaying their marriage or their divorce or the moment everything ended. He was becoming background noise in her life, a chapter that taught her important lessons but did not define her story. Lucy Bourke was writing new chapters now, and every single one of them was hers, written in her own voice at her own size, without apology. Chapter 10. The Three Conditions. 14 months after Lucy left the cake on the floor and walked out of Angus's office and out of his life, she sent him a handwritten invitation that arrived at his apartment on expensive cardstock that felt heavy with meaning. It arrived on a Saturday morning, delivered by courier, and the sight of her handwriting made his hands shake so badly he almost dropped it. "Meet me at the Botanical Gardens, where we had our first date. The bench by the roses. Tomorrow at 2. Bring nothing but yourself." No date was specified beyond tomorrow. No explanation. No context. Just a summons that felt both like hope and like walking toward judgment. Angus called in sick to work on Monday, something he never did anymore, and drove to the gardens with his heart in his throat threatening to choke him. He arrived early, pacing among the roses that were in full bloom, their scent heavy and sweet and almost overwhelming. Lucy was already there when he stopped pacing and actually looked. She sat on the same bench where he had kissed her for the first time, where their whole doomed relationship had started. She wore jeans and a simple white blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders, and for a moment she looked more like the woman he married than she had in over a year. But there was a difference in her posture, in the way she held herself. She was not making herself small anymore. Even in casual clothes, she radiated power and self-possession. Lucy. He approached slowly, like she might disappear if he moved too quickly, like she was a mirage his desperate mind had conjured. "Sit!" She patted the bench beside her, and he sat, keeping distance between them because he did not know what was allowed, what was safe. They sat in silence for a long moment, watching people walk through the gardens, watching life continue around them like the world had not ended when their marriage did. "I asked you here because I have something to tell you," Lucy began, her voice steady and clear. "I have spent the past year rebuilding myself, understanding my own worth, learning to forgive myself for making myself small. I went to therapy. I surrounded myself with people who value me. I started dating, just casually, nothing serious. I rebuilt my sense of self-worth from the ground up, piece by piece." Angus felt his chest tighten at the mention of her dating, but he said nothing. "What right did he have to jealousy? And through all of that, I kept watching you," Lucy continued. "I see all the reports from your supervisors. I hear about the work you do, the effort you put in. I know you have been showing up early, staying late, putting in effort that no one asks for. I know you have been kind to colleagues, that you volunteer to help people who are struggling. You are becoming someone I do not recognize." "I'm trying to become someone better," Angus said quietly. "Someone who deserves a second chance, even if that chance never comes." "The question is whether you are doing this to impress me, or because you are actually changing at some fundamental level." "I am actually changing. I have been in therapy too. I've been working through why I needed to feel superior to you, why I could not see your worth, why I needed you small so I could feel big. And the answer is ugly. I was insecure. I was terrified that if you showed your full self, you would not need me anymore, that you would see how ordinary I was. So I kept you small so I could feel big by comparison. And that is unforgivable." "It is forgivable," Lucy corrected gently, turning to face him fully. "But it is not forgettable. I cannot forget 12 years of being invisible to you. I cannot forget finding you with another woman, on the day I was going to reveal everything, on the day I was ready to stand beside you as an equal. Those memories are scars now, and they changed the shape of who I am. They changed what I will and will not accept. So why am I here? Why bring me to this place?" Lucy pulled an envelope from her pocket and handed it to him. "Because I have a decision to make, and I need your help making it. I need to know if what I am considering is wise or foolish. Open this." Angus opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were 3 handwritten cards, each numbered. The first card read, "Continue therapy." Not couples therapy, just your own individual work. Work on understanding yourself deeply enough that you never need to diminish someone else to feel whole. This is non-negotiable and has nothing to do with me. This is for you, for your own soul. The second card read, "Accept that I will never again hide my power, my wealth, or my capabilities. If we were to rebuild anything, it would be as equals, or with you accepting that I might be your better in some ways. You would never get to feel superior by making me feel small again. I am visible now, and I will stay visible. Can you love someone who is your equal or your superior? Can you handle that?" The third card read, "In 6 months we will go together to Miller's Bakery. We will sit together with the same cheap cake we shared on our first anniversary. And you will tell me every single thing you should have said on our 12th anniversary. Every acknowledgement, every appreciation, every recognition of what I was to you. Not who you thought I was, but who I actually was. And only after that will I decide if forgiveness is possible, if rebuilding is possible." Angus read all 3 cards twice, his vision blurring with tears he did not bother to hide anymore. "These are your conditions for considering reconciliation. These are my conditions for considering whether reconciliation is even possible," Lucy corrected. "I am not promising anything. I am not even promising friendship. I'm promising the possibility of me considering whether we could ever be anything other than employer and employee, whether we could ever rebuild trust. But only if you meet all 3 conditions. And I mean truly meet them, not just perform them to win me back. I will do them. I will do all of them." Angus looked at her desperately, hope and fear warring in his chest. "I have already been in therapy for months. I will never again need you to be smaller than you are. And I will tell you everything I failed to say when I had the chance. Everything I was too blind to see." Lucy studied him for a long moment, searching his face for sincerity, for truth, for any sign of performance or manipulation. "The third condition happens in 6 months from today. That gives you time to work on the first 2, to prove they are real and not just for show. If I see real change, real growth that comes from inside you rather than from wanting me back, then we will go to the bakery. If I sense you are just trying to manipulate your way back into my life, if I see performance instead of transformation, this ends permanently. Do you understand?" "I understand completely." "Good." Lucy stood up, and Angus stood with her, his legs unsteady. They faced each other on the path where they had first fallen in love, and the weight of everything unsaid pressed down like the atmosphere of a planet that was too heavy to support life. "I spent 12 years loving you when you could not see me, when I was invisible to you despite standing right in front of you," Lucy said, her voice soft but firm. "I will not spend another day doing that. So if we do this, if we try to rebuild anything, it will be because you have proven you can see me now. All of me, the power, the wealth, the capability, the strength. Can you love that version of me? Can you love someone who does not need you, but might choose you anyway?" Angus thought about the woman he had married, the one who made him sandwiches and clipped coupons and never complained about being small. Then he thought about the woman standing in front of him now, who commanded rooms and built empires and refused to apologize for existing at full volume. And he realized something that felt like truth finally breaking through layers of self-deception. He had never truly loved the woman he married. He had loved the idea of being loved by her, the feeling of being needed and believed in, but the woman in front of him, this powerful, brilliant, uncompromising woman who terrified and awed him in equal measure, she was someone he had never taken the time to know. "I do not know if I can love that version of you," he admitted, and the honesty felt like cutting himself open and letting the infection drain. "I do not know if I'm capable of loving someone who does not need me, who is complete without me. But I want to learn. I want to try. Because you deserve to be loved for who you actually are, not for who you were willing to pretend to be. You deserve someone who sees you and loves what they see, not someone who needs you blind and small. Lucy nodded slowly, something like approval in her eyes. That is the most honest thing you have ever said to me. That is real. Work on that. Work on becoming someone who can love an equal, who can celebrate someone else's strength instead of feeling diminished by it. And in 6 months we will see if you have succeeded. She started to walk away, not looking back, her steps confident and sure. But then she paused and turned back to him one final time. This is not about winning me back, Angus. This is about you becoming someone worthy of being chosen by someone powerful. Work on yourself because you deserve to be better, not because you want to possess me again. That is the only way this works. Then she left, disappearing into the gardens, and Angus stood alone watching her go. He felt the enormity of the task ahead of him pressing down like gravity. 6 months to become someone worthy of a second chance. 6 months to prove he could love a woman who did not need him, but might choose him anyway. It felt impossible. It felt like being asked to climb a mountain made of his own failures, but he had to try. Because Lucy Bourke was not someone you let go of twice. Because she had given him something he did not deserve. A chance to prove he could change, could grow, could become someone better. He drove home and immediately called his therapist, asking for twice-weekly sessions. He pulled out the cards Lucy had given him and taped them to his bathroom mirror, where he would see them every morning. He made a promise to himself that he would meet her conditions, not to win her back, but to become